you get the energy to do this from God, right? Like you have a
Yes.
prayer life. You're plugged
Yes.
into
Yeah,
the
he's the one.
source of the source of the uncreated light,
Yeah,
and
yeah, he's the one.
you can
Yeah.
receive that and give it on to your family.
Mm.
What about a guy who's not a Christian? What because this I'm working every day with guys who aren't Christians.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
does he
Yeah.
should he at all attempt this, or would you say like just like don't even try, dude, if you don't have God in your life, or what?
Yeah. Yeah. No, God is with us even whether we realize it or not. He is just so much with us.
David Ford, welcome very much. Or should I say Professor David Ford? Welcome to
Paul,
our podcast.
Paul, I like to be called Dr. David. That's how I'm called at the seminary, St.
Okay.
Tikhon's Orthodox Seminary, where I work. And not only a term of endearment, but to differentiate me from my wife, who's another Dr. Ford.
Yeah. Okay, David.
She's Dr. Mary and I'm Dr. David.
Dr. Mary, Dr. David. Yeah,
So,
great.
okay.
Yeah, so you're a professor of church history at St. Tikhon's Theological Seminary. Actually, a seminary that me and my wife have been thinking, if I ever get the opportunity to go and spend like 3 years just really diving into theology, that's where we want to go. It looks like an amazing place. I've seen and read a lot about it, heard a lot about it.
Yes.
You are the author of 6 books and written a whole lot of papers, especially all around the life of a very, very central person in the Orthodox Christian faith, that is St. John Chrysostom.
Yes.
Maybe, the experts of it that I found, at least in the Orthodox world today. And I was introduced very early on in my journey into the Orthodox faith, actually, because back in 2019, I was still a catechumen. I visited the St. John the Baptist monastery in Essex, where I understand your wife has spent a lot of time, actually.
Yes.
And they have this beautiful bookshop there that's just full of like amazing treasures. It's like this like really kind of Harry Potter library kind of place you can really imagine. And I found this book there. Which is Women and Men in the Early Church, the Vision of St. John Chrysostom. And so my life story for the last 7 years before that time had been that, together with a group of friends, we had decided that I wanted to try and get to the problem of this challenge between men and women and how are we interacting today and why is it going so bad and everything like that. And our starting point when we started this, at this time, I was a agnostic, atheist, something or other, definitely, looked at anywhere for wisdom than Christianity, at least. So my basic approach was like, anyway, but the old ways. We have to find something new that's going to work, of course, right? Then as I started that search, and I would say it was an honest search, and thank God for that, because it actually led me then more and more to the conclusion, increasingly, the older the ways, the more they were working. The ways seem to be working not so well. And so, when I was a catechumen there at Essex, and I found your book, and it was really exciting to pick it up and realize, like, okay, well, here we really have someone who's dived into this topic and has tried to understand it. And so it really was for both me, and it was my girlfriend at the time, today my wife. We both used that as a manual for trying to understand how to reorientate our lives. So thank you very much for that. That was a great thing. So to start off this conversation, Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave or Dr. David?
Dr. David, yeah.
Dr. David, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, let's just start with this thing that, there's this idea from feminism that Christianity is all about oppression of women. It's a system of, manipulation and domination. The Bible talks about how, I think Peter says, like, women are the weaker vessel. St. John Chrysostom talks about women as being inferior to men. And isn't it just about the subjugation, unfair subjugation of women underneath men? What's your response to that?
No, Paul, it's not that at all. There's so much misunderstanding of patriarchy, of male headship. Of course, when it's not lived properly, when those who are given the greater responsibility do not fulfill that responsibility, then there's, you know, then there's adverse effects and everyone suffers. But when it's done right, hierarchy, you know, it's just embedded in every aspect of life. As Christians, we actually hearken to the Holy Trinity, where we have three persons who are absolutely equal in their nature, their divine nature, yet they are three hypostases, three persons, and they are in a certain order. You know, it's always Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We don't juggle those three terms. So it's a sublime blending, let's say, of order, of hierarchy, and equality. So when we come to male and female relationships, we have the absolute identity, sameness, equality of human nature, right? But when we look at our bodies, we see, you know, anatomical differences. It's so completely obvious that our Lord has designed us to have different functions. Now, of course, that doesn't mean there's not overlapping, you know, and how male headship works out in each family. Of course, that's up to the couple to work out. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. But there's just so much common sense about it. The man is usually taller, stronger, more deeply voiced, you know. So in the household chores, right, it's just almost automatic. The men will do the heavier labor, and so on. And of course, with child bearing and child raising, that's when the women just come into their glory, you know, and the husband needs to be there more than ever, right? Assuming his responsibility. We really say that with male headship in the family, the heart of it is taking, bearing, shouldering self-sacrificially the ultimate responsibility for not only the material welfare of the family, but the spiritual welfare as well. So you see, it's a great service to the women. And St. John Chrysostom ends up saying to the women, you really have it easier, you know, because you don't have that ultimate responsibility that your husband is bearing with
well,
God.
yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into some of these things and trying to understand. And for myself, you know, like what you're saying, in some ways, it's very simple and clear. And then there's also like a way that there's different levels. So I'm really looking forward to diving this. And we have an hour, maybe even 90 minutes to go into these questions, understand it, because I found, like, you know, I get this idea, like, you know, patriarchy has been, our understanding of patriarchy has been twisted, and male headship doesn't necessarily mean oppression. Actually, it's a prerequisite that it's, you know, the nature of reality is leading from love and compassion and care and including that which is good in our lives. But I think before we dive into that, could you tell us a little bit about this guy, St. John Chrysostom? Because that's, I think, who you've based your life work on. So you can tell us a little bit about who he was and what kind of a society he was living in.
Yes, sure. He was born in Antioch. That's his hometown, which is now in southeastern Turkey. He was trained by Libanius, one of the greatest ancient rhetoricians of the whole ancient world, a pagan rhetorician, developing his natural talent for oratory. Libanius grieved mightily when John decided he would not pursue the law or service in the government or teaching rhetoric to be his successor. Libanius ends up saying that the Christians stole him away from me. So as a late teenager, yes, he returns to the faith that his mother Anthusa brought him up in, the Christian faith, and dedicated all of his talents, all of his training to the service of the church. He does live a few years as a monastic, where he has tremendous. He devotes so much of his time to reading the scriptures. He becomes absolutely saturated in the scriptures, And this ends up being the foundation for his eventually becoming one of the greatest commentators on the Holy Scriptures that the Eastern Church has ever had. And with his rhetorical skills, he ends up becoming really probably the greatest preacher that Christianity has ever seen. So as he lives the monastic life, he developed some health problems, stomach ailments. So this brings him back into the city. His biographer just thanks God, so much that the Lord used this to bring him back so he could serve the church. So he's made a deacon in about the year 380. And then about 6 years later, he's made a priest, ordained to the priesthood, and he's given the main preaching duties in the great church in Antioch. And just to recall, this is late 4th century. Antioch is a tremendously powerful, important commercial city. They said the Grand Boulevard was 4 miles long with columns on each side, So it's a tremendously cosmopolitan city. And then he has 12 years preaching there, becoming tremendously beloved by the people. And then he is whisked away by imperial agents 400 miles overland over to Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. It was by then the main capital of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. How long ago had the Roman Empire been Christian at this point, actually? Was that 380 something?
This is 398 when he becomes patriarch of or archbishop of Constantinople. The empire as a whole was becoming Christian. There was a great boost, of course, with the conversion of Emperor Constantine the Great in the year 312, his victory at the Milvian Bridge. And then by 324, he has consolidated the empire once again, east and west. And he has become a Christian, and he does much to help the church in her recovery from the years of persecution that preceded his conversion. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So St. John Chrysostom then comes to Constantinople.
Yes, he has 6 years of ministry there. Various forces conspire against him. At first, the Empress Evdokia is very favorable to him. They have long talks about the Lord. They share in processions with relics and things like this. But he is such a straight shooter. He has lived a life of asceticism in Antioch. He brings that to Constantinople. The previous archbishop had been kind of lavish in giving entertainment to the to other bishops, to imperial officials, and he didn't do that. He kept his austere way of life, and he preached against ostentation, against luxury. He said all that money you're spending on jewelry would be much better devoted to almsgiving, to helping the poor. And so eventually the empress does turn against him. Various bishops become jealous of his popularity. And also they resent how he expects them to really do their work. He really he attacks corruption wherever he sees it. He attacks laziness, and that rubs some people the wrong way. And then there is this rivalry with the Archbishop of Alexandria, Egypt, named Theophilus. One thing leads to another. He actually gets called to Constantinople to stand trial himself, but he brings gifts and 29 bishops of his own, and he's able to ingratiate himself with the empress, and the tables get turned, and an illegal trial is brought against St. John Chrysostom. It's just amazing. He is sent into exile then. At first, with the first exile, he's brought back very quickly because there's a shaking in the imperial bedroom, maybe an earthquake, but the way it's specified as in the bedroom, it may well have been a miscarriage that the empress endured. She calls him right back. She knows, God is not pleased with her sending him into exile. But about a year later, he is sent into exile again in the summer of year 404, not to return alive. He dies after 3 years in exile. He dies on the way on a forced march to a greater, to a more isolated position or situation of exile. But in those 3 years, he's able to write something like 235 letters that come down to us, and 17 of them were written to his confidant, really, I think we can say his soulmate, the deaconess, St. Olympia. What a treasure those 17 letters are. I had the amazing blessing of translating them, bringing them forth in modern translation. And we just see his heart for for this precious deaconess, about 13 years younger than he. He was her spiritual father. He was also the spiritual father of the monastery for nuns, for women, that St. Olympius was the abbess of. That was right next to the great church in Constantinople. She would serve him his meals, especially with his stomach ailments. And that was one of the outrageous charges brought against him. Oh, he has meals with women, you know, and so imagining the worst there. But of course, nothing untoward ever happened. They had a pristine relationship. But it's just wonderful to me that he had that feminine input, you know, even though he was never married. Sometimes people wonder, how did he have so much wisdom talking about married people and understanding psychology of male and female? He had this wonderful input from the Deaconess Olympia. And I think he learned from the married people in his flock too. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So, I mean, what I want to go into now is you've used the word a couple of times, male headship. And so headship implies, as we've said, hierarchy. And
yes.
I think this historical story you've just told us now, it's a really good example of the intricate nature of hierarchy and how there's a divine hierarchy and then there's an earthly hierarchy. And,
yes.
and how, you know, in the Orthodox Church, this is one of the things that I've really valued, is how, you know, there's actually two hierarchies in the Orthodox Church as well. There's like this formal, official, earthly hierarchy with the bishops and the metropolitans, the patriarchs and stuff like that, which is the earthly one that we create and we use. And then we also have the saints, and the saints are sometimes the lowest of the low, right? But in some ways, that's really a spiritual hierarchy, and those are the ones we really look for. And sometimes these aren't aligned with each other as well, right? So I don't know, and I kind of see this playing out in my own family as well. I don't know. Sometimes I can really see, male headship.
Well, Paul, could I read a bit from the book that you have referenced already?
Yeah.
On this theme,
I'll follow along here.
On this theme, yeah. This is page 115, chapter 7, the relationship of the sexes in the family. And my first subheading here is addressed to husbands. Make your rule glorious! Exclamation mark. So I say, it's evident from all that has been said that male headship in marriage does not imply, for St. John Chrysostom, any form of domineering or demeaning of the wife by the husband. Far from it. Now let's remember, this is late Roman Empire, late 4th century. We have the typical pattern of the pater familias, right? The patriarch of the family. And yes, indeed, sometimes that was pretty oppressive for the rest of those in the family. He could rule with an iron fist. There's no doubt about it. And legally, you know, he had virtually...
Can you give an example of what kind of thing, what was happening at that time in that society, maybe for people who aren't aware of what pater familia and what were the practices of the Roman Empire?
Legally, he really had virtually absolute authority over his wife. Often the wife was much younger. Arranged marriages also come into play, right? And so that's important to remember too. The husband needs to learn how to love his wife. He may well not be head over heels in love with her, He may not even know her much at all before they get married.
Mm-hmm.
So he has this legal authority, almost as if the wife is property, and and the children as well. He could have a baby killed if it's not a boy, or if it's disfigured or something like that. So and women could just had far fewer rights legally than men did in that society. Yeah. So he's St. John says, rather, this authority, this male headship, is grounded in and authenticated by, indeed earned by the husband's virtue. Make then your rule glorious, he says, and glorious it will be when the subject of it, your wife, meets with no dishonor from you. And then I say a husband's authority must flow from the loving service which he gives to his family. It must not derive from an appeal to the fact of his position of leadership. Chrysostom addresses the husbands, and I love how direct he is. We are placed to rule over them, not merely that we may rule, but that we may rule in virtue also. For the one who rules ought especially to rule in this respect by excelling in virtue. And of course, the highest virtue is love, right? But if he is surpassed, he's no longer ruler. He also tells husbands, you have then this authority from necessity. It's just because you happen to be born a male. Don't take any pride out of that. This authority flows from nature, just from being made male. So maintain, he says, also the bond which proceeds from love. And one major aspect of the virtue that husbands are called to is the art of governing oneself. Reason over our passions, our soul governing our body, right? He says, true rulers are those who bear rule over themselves. For there are these four things: soul, family, city, and world. And these things form a regular progression. He, therefore, who is to superintend a family and order it well, so order is just so important in our life, so there's not chaos, right? Must first bring his own soul into order. And I love the Greek word here, Paul. It's rhythmizine. We get our word rhythm. He's saying, bring your life into rhythm, into proper order with your soul, see, your reason governing your passions.
So is that almost a musical term, would you say then?
Yeah, it's almost musical.
Yeah, musical.
It really is. There's harmony here, It's
Yeah.
a dance. And we could sure say that with husbands and their wives, the rhythm of their mutual relationship, the dance, it's so beautiful.
Can I stop you there and just ask?
No,
So
of course.
I've tried this with my wife, so we're both familiar with these texts and these scriptures, and sometimes we have disagreements about things.
Of course, it's all part of it, right?
Both of us have been living in, a society which has a very, very different approach a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So
granted that.
this is something that I think all people struggle with.
It is.
And so I've noticed that bringing up with my wife, like, oh, you need to be a submissive wife. It just doesn't work.
It does not work. No, we never appeal to our authority.
Our maleness as the basis of leadership. Yeah. So what is the step to take for a man? I think that for me, there's something about patience, because virtue is one thing, but it's like sometimes it's like when, how long does one have patience to, how long can you wait because it doesn't always give a payoff straight away, right?
That's right.
Sometimes things can get worse before they get better. What would you say?
Yeah. Patience is tremendous. If things do really get rough, I just had an insight not too long ago. Just look at your wife and imagine how she will be in heaven. How will she be in heaven? All those rough edges will be totally smoothed away. She'll be polished, gleaming, and you will too, right? So that also gets us, that reminds us of the Orthodox understanding of marriage as meant to be eternal. Say, we are building something for eternity when we're working on a relationship with our wife. So that should give us great encouragement as we're patient with, and she's got to be patient with us too, right? We've all got our rough edges. Yeah.
When you say that, it just reminds me of this, like, just this massive shift from a secular understanding of marriage as a legal arrangement to create two productive members of society that are legally bound and able to get, you know, some kind of benefits from each other right now in tax breaks or whatever it is, right? And like, and then the distance from that to like creating an eternal sense of beauty, a bond that's like, you know, crosses the very mysteries of existence, right?
Yes.
It's so hard to bridge that gap, you know, when some people don't get that, then
it takes time to grow into that vision, you know, but the more we do, the more it expands, even, because it's endless. It's endless. The vision is so grand. Oh my. Could I share another amazing passage? Talking about bearing each other's burdens. Okay, listen to what St. John says. This is in his famous homily 20 on Ephesians 5, which is the passage that's read at every Orthodox wedding service. Wives, be subject to your husbands is part of that passage. So St. John says, yes, you've heard that line from verse 24. Wives, be subject to your husbands as unto the Lord. St. John says, so now, you husbands, hear the measure of love on your part that's required. Do you want to have your wife obedient to you as the church is to Christ? Then take yourself the same provident care for her as Christ takes for his church. Yes, he says, even if he, and of course we remember how Christ died, right, to give life to his church. So St. John says, even if it becomes necessary for you to give your life for your wife, yes, and to be cut into pieces 10,000 times, yes, and to endure and undergo any suffering whatever, do not refuse it. In the same way, then, as God brought to himself her who turned her back on him, he's talking now about Israel in the Old Testament, God's chosen people, you know, who so often abandoned him and started worshiping false gods, who hated and spurned and disdained him. God, the Lord, woos her back, not by menaces or by violence or by terror or anything like that, but what? By his unwearied affection. And we have really the most famous chapter probably on this in the Old Testament is Hosea 2, when Hosea is actually commanded by the Lord to have 2 children from a prostitute, as kind of exemplifying Israel's abandonment of him. And then he pursues the wayward wife into the wilderness to woo her back, forgiving her all her misdeeds because of his overflowing love for her. So this phrase, willing to be cut in pieces 10,000 times, I used to think, you know, that was kind of typical exaggeration. But when you're really trying in your marriage to smooth the rough edges, there can be moments of really getting hurt. Your wife has a sharp word for you. Instead of, you know, kind of recoiling or resenting or having my manly pride get hurt, I've learned, this was not easy at first at all. And still it's not always easy, but I've learned to be grateful for those hard words, because no one knows us better than our wife, right? And above all, they want us to be all we can be as human beings, as men. And so, you know, so they can be more proud of us as being their, you know, as having us as their husband.
So how does this work? Because there's also an aspect where like the Orthodox Church has, as is well known, only male priests,
Hmm.
and this male headship role,
Yes.
it seems to indicate that the man has a more, could I call it, a sharply honed ability of discernment, or at least the responsibility for the overall spiritual direction of the family as a
Yes.
unit, but also for the wife's salvation, actually.
Yes. Yes.
And
Absolutely. Hmm.
the woman's responsibility, it seems like, I feel as well, like women are more sensitive and sometimes more attentive to specific
Yes.
details, and certainly in seeing
Yes.
my faults, I also see that as well. But
Sorry, and what?
certainly in seeing my shortcomings, I think
Yeah.
my
Okay.
wife is
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
better than I am,
Right.
obviously.
They see
Um,
us. It's amazing their insight.
yeah.
Yeah.
But why is it that
Yeah.
men have this? Why the male priestly role?
Yeah.
What is it
Well,
that there's being
it's
masculine and feminine
fatherhood,
there?
right? Yeah, it's fatherhood. God is father. He's not mother.
Mhm.
He provides the oversight, the organization. Taking the responsibility. Kind of an administrative gift, maybe, so to speak. Um, Whereas the wife bearing the children, nursing, it's just a one-on-one intimacy there that's different. It's complementary, of course, but it's the fatherhood. Why is the priest always a male? Because a female can't be a father
Mhm.
to the flock, and bearing that ultimate responsibility before God, that every soul in the care of the priest, that priest will be ultimately accountable for. So again, that's an awesome responsibility that the women are spared of. They
Mhm.
don't have uh, to have that responsibility, that
Yeah.
burden. They're
So the
spared.
way I see it kind of happening, and I'm living in Denmark, and
Uh-huh.
what I see is, like, when men don't take responsibility,
Oh,
then the women do.
yeah, that's
Um,
right. It's a vacuum. It's like a power vacuum, right?
yeah,
Someone has to.
yeah.
Someone
Someone
has
has
to
to.
step in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the idea of, like, oh, let's all just be equal and
Oh
flat.
my.
It's just like,
No.
that's not the way reality plays itself out, right? So,
Exactly right.
so is the example of the empress that you told us, is that
Yes.
an example of what happens? Or
Oh,
am I
oh
being
my.
unfair? Like,
Well, that's
should
interesting.
should women not be empresses and queens as the sole leader of a nation state and an empire?
Well, she was married to the emperor, but in this
Okay.
Arcadius, yeah, she was not ruling on her own.
Mhm.
But why we mention her is because she happened to be the stronger of the two in terms of their personality.
Mhm.
Um,
So that was
which
a
is
man who
really
wasn't stepping up.
something's out of kilter there. Yeah, but of course it's a fallen world, and the ideals are not always lived up to. But she was able to influence her husband. I'm sure he was much more reluctant to send Chrysostom into exile, but he went along with his wife, which is sad to say. And they both died young. St. John Chrysostom's biographers predicted all these people who are treating St. John so miserably, dismally, they will die miserable deaths themselves. And both of them did die young. So something
Mhm.
was out of kilter there. Yeah.
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 Okay. So how far would you take this? If we look at, kind of more modern politics, there's been several, you know, very important female leaders on the international stage. Do you at
Yes.
all relate this
No.
to modern
No.
politics? Margaret Thatcher, or,
Oh,
right now
sure.
in Denmark, we have both a queen and a female prime minister. The
Yeah.
queen is related actually to the Russian Tsar family. There was Queen Dagmar, who was a
Ah.
direct descendant of the present Danish queen. I think the Danish queen's fantastic. She's amazing. She's the best
Yeah.
thing in the whole
Yeah.
about
No.
this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. There. This can happen as well. There have been wonderful empresses
Yeah.
in the history of the Orthodox Church. Saint Pulcheria comes to mind. Her name means beautiful.
Mhm.
She was the one who basically called the Fourth Ecumenical Council.
Mhm.
Um, so, but these are kind of exceptions to the general pattern. But that's another wonderful thing about Orthodoxy. There's a fluidity, there's a flexibility.
Yeah.
Everyone, there's such an acknowledgement, a recognition that everyone is so unique. You know, we have our own precious, unique strengths as well as weaknesses. And so there can be exceptions to general patterns, but that doesn't nullify, you know, the general patterns.
The general pattern, yeah. I mean, the one way I've been looking at it, you know, especially if you look at an individual couple, then, you know, you meet men who have a very strong and even a good feminine side, or very compassionate and very caring. And you meet women who have been, you know, very tomboyish and are very powerful and direct. And so often a couple will fit well together with a kind of, you know, one called a reverse polarity or something like that. And so the way I see it is like, if I have a man and I want to help that man to become the best possible man he can be, I'm going to try and strengthen his masculinity.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, you know, like, I'm not going to look down on a man who you know, happens to be, you know, and has a strong feminine side and is able to create value in the world through that as well. And even has found a relationship where he fits together with another human being in that way. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, Paul. And I would just say, you know, kind of encouraging each one of us to just be ourselves, you know, to stand before the Lord and ask him to touch us in the deepest part of our being. And through this, we will understand who we're meant to be. Not to put on airs, you know, not to try to fit ourselves into a preconceived mold, but just kind of to be be ourselves, who we were made to be. He wants us to flourish in our uniqueness. You know, he's the one who gave us our uniqueness. He wants that to blossom.
Yeah. But this is I think it's so difficult to communicate, because on the one hand, we're saying, you know, like, reality is patriarchal. This is the way things laid about. You're the man, so you have to be taking leadership in your family. And at the same time, we recognize, like, as things move more towards God, all of these differences disappear. And actually, like, you know, in Christ, like, there is, I think I read in your book as well, it says, like, there is no male headship in heaven. Like, you know, then men and women are completely equal.
In the heavenly realm, yes.
In the heavenly realm,
So, you know, I think one of the great keys to me is when the husband cherishes his wife, you know, as a princess, let's say, even tie into that chivalry, you know, all the good that's there. If he cherishes his wife as a princess, she will respond and rejoice in his care. It's just so automatic. I feel safe in your arms, you know, this kind of thing the wife will be saying. And I'll be grateful for your leadership. Without you even saying a word about male headship. It's just,
what do you mean by cherish? What's in that word cherish? It's not, we don't use it that much anymore, do we?
There was that song back in the 60s. Cherish is the word. Yeah, I wish we would use it more. I think it means to behold her beauty inward and outward, to appreciate that, to just yearn to fill her with your love, because you respect her so much as an amazing creation of our Lord. He's the one who designed her. He's the one who, of all the women in the world, he's the one who has brought her to you. I mean, that in itself we can get so mystical about, right? and every piece of the puzzle that ended up bringing this one woman into my life to be my partner forever. I mean, it's just so awesome. So awesome. Yeah.
That's great.
That's all part of Cherishing.
One of so I listened to your interview with Dave Domazowski from Dad Devotionals. And it was a great podcast. It's a great podcast. I've listened to a couple of episodes now and really appreciated it. But he asked you a question. He said, if there's one thing that you could have done in your marriage that you could have done better, what would it be? And you said, I wouldn't have let my kids disrespect my wife ever, at all. Not at all. And that really hit me actually as well, because we have a 2-year-old at the moment, and he's testing boundaries. I've noticed how I let it slide sometimes.
Yeah.
I let him, kind of like, she says like, Emmanuel, do this, and he's like, no. and she says, Emmanuel, please do this now, and he's no. And then he makes a joke and he looks at me and he smiles or something like that, right?
Hey, he looks at
And
you.
so he's looking for,
Yeah.
and so just like, since I listened to that like 2 days ago, I've really been noticing how I can cherish her,
Yes.
and my son actually as well, because allowing him to disrespect his mother, it's such a bad pattern. And the scary thing is he's probably getting it from me. That's the most concerning thing. Hopefully not too much. I think he also sees other kids and whatever, right? And he's just testing out boundaries. But
they need the boundaries so much.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, and I just see how much it's so clear. It's my role, because she can't do it. It's not her role to really give those, like, that is an unacceptable way of talking to your mother, young man.
Yes.
That's just not the way we do things in this family.
Exactly. With great finality on that. So important. And that is a way of cherishing our wife. Cherishing her needs, right? Her desires when she's asking, even just, for help with things around the house, to fix that light bulb right away. Change it. Don't just wait for it for time to pass and then you finally get around to it. Honoring her requests right away. Listening to make sure you've got it straight, what she's asking, what she's hoping for. That's all part of cherishing. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, there's two different directions I want to take this right now. So I'm going to start with the one, and then I hope I get back to the other one.
All right.
But so there's a book in the field of men's work that I've been working in for a long time. It's by a guy called Dr. Robert Glover. It's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And what he describes as a tendency, which I think is very widespread in our society at the moment, is it's not the nice guy in the way that you're describing it, but it's a manipulative tendency to pretend to do everything according to the way that other people want, and especially in a marriage relationship. But it's actually a way of not showing up, because there's a harboring of kind of like expectation for payback, and it's like kind of like a way of manipulating other people, and really just it's driven by pride of trying to uphold an image of oneself as like, I'm a really nice guy, I do everything for my wife, and therefore she needs to be nice back to me, kind of thing, right?
And anything that smacks of manipulation is not from God. It's not healthy. It's not good for anybody, and that's definitely not being ourselves. We're not made to be manipulators. My goodness, we're made to be real. It's one of the greatest things most wives, I think, really desire in a husband, is someone to share deepest thoughts with, deepest feelings, deepest desires, longings, hopes, dreams, sharing at such a profound level, with openness, with nothing artificial.
So, Dr. David, where you get the energy to do this from God, right? Like you have a prayer life. You're plugged into
he's the
source of the source of the uncreated light.
He's the one.
You can receive that and give it on to your family. What about a guy who's not a Christian? What? Because I'm working every day with guys who aren't Christians. How does he? Should he at all attempt this, or would you say just like, don't even try, dude, if you don't have God in your life, or what?
No, God is with us even whether we realize it or not. He is just so much with us and overflowing with so much love for every one of us, whether we realize it or not. And anything that's good. I love Philippians 4:8. St. Paul, whatever is good, whatever is lovely, whatever is pure, whatever is honorable, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. You see, whatever anybody does that's good, God is there. See? So the more we do good, the more we serve our wives, pay attention, to their needs, fulfill that role of bearing the greatest responsibility, that will bring us closer to God, whether we realize it or not, because He is there wherever anything is good or true. He's there. Yeah.
And would you agree with me that it's still important to just be aware of the underlying spirit with what you're doing as well? Because,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like things should be done in joy and with an understanding of like that. You know, I'm doing this because of love, and also being honest when, like, you know, I'm angry and upset, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated. And for myself, it's like I need a good male friend to talk about those things with often, to work through them and to see how I can grow. Yeah,
that's mighty important too. Yes.
Okay. So the other direction thing that I wanted to take this into was, in this case of setting boundaries for my son. There was a time when, again, he was like, his mom said, "Time to change your nappy." He was no, and then I said to him, "Hey, listen to your mom." She said, "Change your nappy," and then he says no, and he runs away again. And so I run after him. I grab hold of him, and I can feel like there's this resistance in him, and what I realize is, like, he's 2 years old now. I can still kind of like bring him in and say, like, okay, hey, you need to submit to my authority. I'm your dad.
Exactly.
But I'm right there on the edge where I like the final tool. And let me just say openly, like, as I grew up, my parents gave me hidings. They did it in a loving and caring way as well. Yeah. But in Denmark, it's seen as, like, you know, it's basically akin to murder to spank a child. And so if he went to, like, school and said, like, "Oh yeah, my mom and dad spanked me," we would have social services visiting us in our home as well. So what are the tools that a father uses when he gets to the end of, you know, just speaking?
The firm voice, the hard look, you know, eye to eye, and holding the shoulders, maybe, you know, "Look at me, son, in my eyes, I'm holding your shoulders. Do what's right. You must do what I'm telling you for your good, for your mama's good, for my good, for the peace and harmony in our home." And the more we move in that direction with our kids, no matter how young they are, it'll pay off in the end. You know, we want, because the more we let things slide early, things will get more and more difficult to bring them back into order later. So it's important to do it from the start. Gently, but firmly. Both.
Okay. So you would also say, for example, a spanking, that's not something that you've
I don't think it's necessary. We never spanked our daughter. No. No.
Okay.
Not necessary.
Yeah, there's a book called Parenting Towards the Kingdom, which I think is also just a fantastic guide about how, and a lot of it's about, like, just being with your child in their struggle.
Yes, we're familiar with that book. We love the author, Philip Mamalakis. He's a dear friend of ours, actually. So he's a great resource. Parenting Towards the Kingdom.
Good. So I want to dive into something else that you mentioned, one of the quotes, which was this thing about that you start with your own soul and bring order into it and find the rhythm, the order or rhythm of it. And then from there, you can learn how to be establishing order in your family, and from there to the society, or to your city, I think it was, and then to the world, basically, as well, right? So can you say a bit more about that? And what have you found of, like, the most important aspects of that as well?
I think prayer has been a huge thing. There's just a certain order, you know, when we have a regular prayer life. It doesn't have to be very long, but just that constant orientating ourselves towards the source of our being, our Creator, our Savior, and asking for His help, really, to help with the purity of our thought life, as well as all of our actions, and with a fortitude, you know, to do what's right, even if it hurts. And that's where I think true manliness comes in as well. doing the right thing, no matter if it hurts, no matter if it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, we have, so in Manifesto, we have what we call the 10 principles, and we're busy doing a review of them right now. And we've just been through the first principle, number 1, which we call it Know Thyself. Because we're trying to address a broader audience than just Christians, really.
Sure, that's great.
But it's really, you again, in that last interview I heard you having with Dave, you said this quote, "Be still and know that I am God." And there's something about like that, like some, there's a really fundamental mystery to existence that everybody can do this. You don't need to be a Christian card carrier. I believe in Jesus. It helps to have that. But I think every man, if he wants to lead in his life, order his own soul, become clear about who he is as a human being, he needs to do this. And even if he has a hard time using the word God, just be still and know.
There's something greater. Right. There's something greater, and to be awestruck about. I love that. Stand in awe and sin not. Stand in awe. Saint Ephrem the Syrian said the highest form of prayer is to stand in awe before God. The awesomeness of creation in itself is so grand and glorious, right? And how much more the creator of it all. Oh my. To be connected with our creator, it's like face to face with the writer of the manual, the owner's manual of how to live. Oh my. It's great.
It's almost like I can sense how lucky you feel you are to have discovered the sequence of existence.
So blessed. When you're going the wrong way, you hit rock bottom, and you call out to the Lord, he rescues you. I mean, you appreciate everything he is that much more, and all the great blessings he gives.
Could I get you maybe if you can finish up there, actually, that would be great. If would you be up for telling where how you came to this experience, this realization, what made it real for you? Because I don't know about you, I grew up in a Christian home, and I kind of went through the rotes, but it was, I think there was also a kind of materialism in the church that I was a member of as well. It was influenced by the culture, and there was a secular kind of understanding, and so I kind of got it. I realized that there was something good here, and I tried to be a good person, but I just didn't have the strength in myself to do it. And so I got pulled away. And the more I got pulled away, I rationalized. I studied a scientific education at university, and I found like, oh yeah, all that God stuff, that's just like weird and doesn't make sense. It's old fashioned or something like that. And then it was only when I, just in my late 30s, that suddenly like, things broke down, like kind of God broke in again, and everything just made sense.
Well, I was raised kind of in a nominal Presbyterian church, and basically it was like a nice story, but I didn't really see people's lives changed, and the Lord had mercy on me. He led me to a book called Hang Loose with Jesus. This is back in the 70s, and the joy of that book, Frances Gardner Hunter, just that joy that she conveyed in that book just went right to my heart, right to my heart. And suddenly he was real, and Paul, at the same moment, I realized, wow, I don't have to try to be good to do the right thing in my own strength. God is there to give me that strength to do what's good and right and true. It transformed my life right on this one.
I got to say, like, for me, I think the big barrier when I actually started getting honest with myself, it was like, oh, if I become a Christian, I'm going to have to do this and this, and I'm going to have to stop doing this and this. And then I thought, well, I don't know if I can do that. That sounds too difficult. And like, do I, it's like, can I? And what became clear was exactly this. It's like, no, that was the wrong understanding. It's actually, it's about letting go of trying to do stuff and allowing yourself to be led. It's about, just like following the nature of reality instead of trying to force yourself into a specific way of being.
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
You know, but that's beautiful to hear that book. Maybe I remembered one last thing as well that I thought was really interesting was you mentioned that your own conversion was through really like studying the history of the church, whereas your wife, it was more like the feelings that she experienced through worship as well. So that but it's interesting to hear, like, as also you just right now said, like, the joy from that book as well. But I guess that's what was orthodoxy was really then looking at
seeing the story of the early church, the martyrs especially. Talk about manliness, and women too, with amazing, tremendous courage. But again, not in their own strength, you know, God's grace giving them the joy, even in the midst of such suffering. Just, you know, the God is so real. And in those martyrdoms, people saw it. People were astonished, first of all, that these people would willingly go to their deaths for what they believed, you know, and then so often that to see the miracles, you know, where the lion would even just turn away, you know, because the holiness of the one willing to die for Christ. So so much there.
Dr. David, thank you so much for sharing. And certainly I can just, even on the transatlantic connection here on Google Meet, then I'm really appreciating just the sense of integration that I can hear you've received from the grace of God. And I'm having tasted it for myself as well. It's beautiful to know it's real.
It's so real.
So thank you for sharing that.